Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron, and today we are going to be going over 5 very strong driller builds. So let's hop right into this. Our very first build, our primary weapon is the crisper Flamethrower, and the overclock that we're taking for this one is a classic. It is Facemelter. Facemelter deals a ton of extra damage with coming at the downsides of reduced tank size and overall less reach. The reach is pretty noticeable on this one, so I did pair this with a long range option. We'll talk about that in a second. But right now, this is what I usually run on my Facemelter Flamethrower. It's pretty straightforward. I run an extra tank size in tier 1. That's just to make up for the downside of having a smaller tank. Although you could go with the longer reach though too. It's also pretty good. Going with extra damage in tier 2 because we might as well go with more damage when we are already stacking damage. Extra ammo in tier 3 and 4. That helps quite a bit. And then in tier 5, we're going to targets explode, so we can deal even more damage, although flame radiance is also pretty good too. Just depends on what you want. The way that you use Facemelter is pretty simple. You put the flamethrower on something and you get close to it and you just hold it down until it dies. That's it. That's the whole strategy for this build. It is really, really strong at close range and will melt through just about everything. Even dreadnoughts who can't be lit on fire, Facemelter will still do a high amount of damage per second to them. Although you do have to get into the danger zone of those dreads, it is well worth it because of the amount of damage you deal. Now for a secondary, we're going to be pairing this with the Subata, loaded with explosive reload. The way explosive reload works is the same way embedded detonators works on the Zukov submachine guns. Once you fire your shots, it will stick into the target, and then when you go to reload, it will explode, dealing damage to them. Downsides to this one though are that you lose out on mag size by about half, you only get 6 shots, and you lose out on total ammo. For this, you're just going to want to build full ammo. I build it usually like this, going with the faster reload, although you can take whatever you want in tier 1. Extra ammo in tier 2, extra ammo in tier 3. The other options really aren't worth it there. Hollow point rounds in tier 4 because you do get a little bit more damage than just going with the regular base damage. And then the Mactera coating just to help deal with Macteras. You could go with the fire option, although the fire option does not affect your detonators. It only affects the direct damage of the pistol. So you still won't be getting tons of damage out of it, but if you want a little bit more on top of that, it's a perfect option too. Same deal with explosive reload as with the embedded detonators though, when we were talking about Scout. It works very differently on Dreadnought armor. It actually doesn't work on the Dreadnought's armor itself, but if you've stripped away the armor on like the Twins or on the regular Dreadnought, then it will work on those enemies, so you can shoot them once they have an exposed bit to have the explosives go off. Otherwise, they will not go off. The general way that I use this build is just use the flamethrower at very close range. It does tons of damage, clears up small enemies very fast, clears up big enemies really fast, and then any enemy that is not within close range or enemies that want to stay at a longer range, whether that be spitters, menaces, spitballers, whatever it might be, explosive reload is there to take care of it. It's also really good on escort missions because explosive reload takes care of the flying rocks extremely fast. Quite the straightforward first build that we have here, but a very strong one. Moving on to our second build here, we have our primary weapon being the Cryo Cannon, loaded up with Tuned Cooler. Tuned Cooler makes it so that you can freeze enemies faster than you normally would with the Cryo Cannon at the cost of a slightly longer charge up time, as well as it does mess with your pressure gain rate a little bit. This is the build that I'm running with it, although you can switch out the tier 1 option of the faster spin up with cooling if you want to get to that nice 10 freezing power. That does help you. I just like the faster spin up because it's a little bit noticeable as to how long it takes for your gun to actually charge up. Going with extra reach in tier 2, super useful for clearing out flying things because anything that you freeze, it will die immediately. You could also go with extra ammo here. I don't really think there's a bad option in tier 2. Extra rate of fire in tier 3, extra ammo in tier 4, and then cold radiance in tier 5. So this will freeze all sorts of enemies very fast. It works really well on Dreadnought missions because you can freeze them and have your team deal massive damage to them. Of course, it works really well if you have impact axes, and frozen enemies can be killed quite easily with Driller because you have your drills as well as your pickaxe. So if you want to get extra vampire value, you can, or even through your throwing axes. We are also going to be pairing this with our secondary being the Wave Cooker, and this is built all for thermal shock status effect. We are going to be taking Mega Power Supply, which increases your overall ammo as well as increases your rate of fire, but makes it so your cooldown rate and your overheat duration are worse. That shouldn't matter though, so long as you're managing your heat. And as soon as you freeze something and switch to this, there is a very high chance that you'll kill something outright because of the thermal shock status effect. So we're running extra ammo, although you can take whatever you want in tier 1, and extra ammo is really not necessary for this. Extra AoE does work quite well with this, and it is pretty fun. Better cooling in tier 2. This is just to kind of make up for a lack of cooling, but any of them will work in tier 2. Slowdown in tier 3, wider lens in tier 4, and then the exothermic reactor in tier 5. That will get us our thermal shock status effect. So if we freeze something, we switch to this, we use that, we trigger the effect. Thermal shock deals 200 flat damage that is unaffected by any sort of damage reduction that the enemy might have. at least as far as I'm aware. I don't think it's affected by warden buffs or anything like that. This build is extremely ammo efficient. It takes you forever to run out of shots with either of your weapons because you have so many with both, and you're really not using very much ammo for either of these. It clears up crowds extremely well. It can even work on big things very well. It used to work even better on things like oppressors. That was before the thermal shock status effect got changed to where it functions the way that it should work. Before it was a little bit too strong, but it still is extremely strong against crowds, as well as you can just use the wave cooker to pick off things at long range, so you can pick off jellyfish, spitters, whatever it might be. You're still going to potentially struggle against things like menaces because the wave cooker doesn't do the most amount of damage per second, or really the most amount of damage, but it does give you at least some option to be firing at long range because the wave cooker does have infinite range on it, which is pretty nice. And of course, you work really well against flying enemies because you have the tuned cooler, and if you freeze any flying enemy, it will die instantly. For our third strong loadout, we are running the Corrosive Sludge Pump with Volatile Impact. Volatile Impact gives you more direct damage when shooting the Sludge Pump, which is great if you want to spam fire it, and it actually racks up a lot of damage really fast. It's really good against any large enemies. Sludge Pump is also really good against any armored enemies because you can just flat out ignore their armor just by shooting them. Whether that be something like an Oppressor or Praetorian or a Dreadnought, doesn't really matter, just keep firing right at it and you'll deal damage to it. This gets you even more damage at the downside of your AoE shots not being as good as they used to be. Not a big deal if you just plan on spam firing it. This is the build that I run with Volatile Impact Mixture, going with larger mags in Tier 1, but you can pick whatever you want in Tier 1. Extra damage in Tier 2. I really like stacking the damage with this. It's not necessary, but I like it. Then extra ammo in Tier 3. Tier 4, it's your choice. I like going to the faster charge, but whatever you want to do. And then extra damage in Tier 5. It should also be noted that since Season 2, the Sludge Pump has been buffed in terms of its rate of fire, and Volatile Impact also got buffed since the Sludge Pump technically got nerfed, but not really. It got more buffs overall than nerfs. This is a really strong overclock against basically everything that you can hit. Its only real downside is that the Corrosive Sludge Pump doesn't necessarily have the most range. You could kind of make up for that with the Tier 1 mod of having faster moving projectiles. That would help, but with that being said, we are running the wave cooker as our secondary. We have this one with gamma contamination. This is the radiation overclock that has a chance of putting radiation on enemies. It does lower your damage and lower your effective shot width. That shouldn't matter too much because the radiation does affect the enemy that you hit with it, as well as the enemies that surround it, dealing damage to them and slowing them as well, which is very nice. The damage lingers for a very long time. It lingers for something like 7 or 8 seconds, and it does a decent amount of radiation damage over time. So you do have long range with this. The way that I build it is like this. So going with extra ammo, faster cooldown, slows, wider AoE, although either of the Tier 4s would be perfectly fine. It's your choice. Sometimes I'll go with the faster rate of fire one, just if I want to kill something a little bit faster like a web or acid spitter, but the extra white lines can also help hit a couple of enemies, so you might be able to spread it more. And then going with the contagion transmitter in Tier 5, that will help with the sludge pump. That gets us extra damage if an enemy is affected by the sludge. This is a very good build for slowing down enemies, and it's a very good damage over time build, as well as a direct damage and burst damage build. It kind of works for just about everything. Again, you might have some limitations. You don't kill things like spitballers, at least if they're really far away quickly, and same goes with like menaces. But outside of that, anything that is at close to medium range, you're going to kill very, very fast, and even lower health enemies like the spitters, whether that be web or acid spitters, the wave cooker can take care of at very long range. The way that I usually try to use this is use Volatile Impact for just about everything at close and medium range, and then I'll usually just try to use the wave cooker on things at longer ranges to put the radiation on them, because it does tick for quite a while and deals a lot of damage over time. Usually you don't even need to wait for them to get to like half health from the wave cooker if you want to save ammo. For our fourth strong build, we go back to the Flamethrower as our primary weapon, and this time we are using the compact feed valves. And the really good news about compact feed valves is it has almost no downside. The only technical downsides it has is a slightly longer reload, which isn't really all that noticeable, and slightly shorter reach, which can be modified with taking the Tier 1, although that is not entirely necessary either, because having the 8 meters of reach is still okay. It feels fairly similar to the base Flamethrower. Good news is, though, you get a whole bunch more ammo and tank size, which allows you to build the Flamethrower really however you'd like. I like building it like this, so we go with extra reach in Tier 1, extra fire in Tier 2, although any of the options in Tier 2 are really good. Extra ammo in Tier 3 and 4, you don't need both of these. You could take either one. The slowdowns are also pretty good with this one, especially if you like sticky flames. And then going with Heat Radiance in Tier 5, although again, this one is completely optional too. This one is probably one of the most flexible overclocks for the Flamethrower, and no matter what build you like running with the Flamethrower, this one can complement it pretty well. It's also extremely ammo efficient. It takes you a very long time, especially if it's built like this, for you to actually run out of flames. By the time the first resupply gets called in, you're probably still going to have 3/4 of your ammo or 3/4 of what you would normally have with a flamethrower. So you can oftentimes just give one of your resupplies away, or every other resupply away with this particular build. Now, since we're running this with full ammo, we are also going to be taking a secondary that is very ammo efficient. Our secondary for this build is the EPC, and we are going to be taking energy rerouting, a clean overclock that is really, really good. This one gives you extra ammo, and it also gives you a faster charge time with the EPC. The way that I usually build this is like this, so going to the extra ammo, extra movement speed, more efficient charges in tier 3, although you could take whatever you want in tier 3, all of these are really good options. Extra ammo in tier 4, and then thin containment field in tier 5. Since this one is a clean overclock though, you can realistically build this however you'd like. You could build it for regular shot damage and just build it in a fire build, or you could build it for charge shot damage, doing more AoE damage overall. I like taking it like this and using it primarily for mining, but it also works as a pretty good secondary for picking up things at longer ranges. Again, the EPC is not really the best at long range, but it's good enough, at least in most situations, to be picking off things like spitters and larger, mostly stationary targets like the menaces or the spitballers. So you do have that going for it, and with the thin containment field, you can potentially mine with it. You can use it as a tool, which is extremely useful. This does take quite a lot of time to get used to, especially if you keep messing with the charge speed. At least it does for me. It always takes me time to adjust to whichever overclock I'm using. But this one is one of the more forgiving ones because it does give you extra ammo and it does give you that faster charge speed. It also makes it easier to just be using the thin containment field during fights, because the thin containment field also technically deals flat damage, where if you do detonate the thin containment field near enemies, it does a flat 240 damage to all enemies within that, regardless of where you hit them. So really straightforward build here. It's super ammo efficient, and it will last you a very long time during just about every type of mission. The only mission type that this one might potentially struggle on, and even then I say might, is potentially rival presence, and that's only if you have like sniper turrets in really inconvenient locations, because the plasma pistol's not way great for taking them out. It certainly can, and the flamethrower can, so long as you can actually get up there and reach to them, as well as your drills can too, and your axes. Driller's actually really good at taking out robots in general. That's why I say you might have issues with this, but it just really depends on how high the ceilings are for you. And then for our fifth and final really strong driller build, we have a full AoE build, something that driller definitely excels in. So we are taking the corrosive sludge pump once again, and we are pairing this with disperser compound. This makes it so your charge shot area damage is less, but you get more fragments overall. And the way that I build this is just like this. So this is just going for all the AoE that I can. So we have larger AoE in tier 1 and tier 2, more ammo in tier 3, more ammo efficiency in tier 4, and then more slowdown in tier 5. With this particular setup, you can cover areas in a lot of sludge, and it is great for slowing down hordes. It's great for dealing tons of damage to hordes, and it can even work pretty well against larger enemies. Against larger enemies, it's still better to usually shoot one shot out at a time, but if you are down to like one shot in your gun, you can still use the charge shot to get potential extra value out of it. Now for a secondary, I really like taking this with the persistent plasma. Persistent plasma lowers your overall charge shot damage, but whenever you do use a charge shot, it lets you have plasma just sitting around. The plasma deals damage over time, and it ticks over time. It actually lasts for a very long time, something like 8 seconds on the ground, and deals more damage than the amount of damage you lost. The way I built this is the exact same way that I built the energy rerouting, although again, you can switch this up however you'd like. You could even take the fire in tier 5 if you want, and just use it for that. Use charge shots for slowing enemies down, and then just use regular shots to actually light the sludge on fire. That is an option. The reason why I take it like this is just because I really like using it as a tool too, so that I can actually mine with it. Although if you're not doing that, then taking the fire in tier 5 is a really great option. This also slows enemies down, and this stacks on top of the slow. You can actually stack even more slowdown if you want to put neurotoxin on this, and then you have something like a 90% slowdown of everything that walks through it, or something close to that. It's insanely slow. It's surprising how well that actually works in all combination. But pretty straightforward build here. It doesn't really struggle too much against single targets either, because the sludge pump is still pretty good at dealing with them, and with the persistent plasma, this will still deal damage over time. So even against larger enemies, it's okay. It's not going to be as good as something like Volatile Impact, like we talked about earlier, or Facemelter, but it will still get the job done for just about every scenario. This one is also quite ammo efficient, because you usually don't need to take very many shots from either of these to slow down the bugs. You can also slow down all the bugs and then just use something like your drills to kill them too. Next time we're going to be taking a look at Engineer, and it was pretty difficult to just pick 5 of Engineer's strong loadouts. So that one will be a lot of fun. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I really do appreciate it. If you guys are new here and you haven't already, be sure that you get subscribed. That way you get notifications when I post these. Special thanks to the supporters of this channel. These are my members over here on YouTube and my patrons over on Patreon. they get early access to videos just like this. If you would like to be a part of that, there are links down in the description. And if you would like to see more of my deep rock content, there will be a playlist right over here. Be sure to check that out. Thanks everybody. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.